was the last meeting, is that right, Leon?
Yeah, I think the last one or the one before.
So I have, I wrote back to NCCC on the 21st of December, met with some members of the working group on the 1st of February, and I did just write back again today, so I don't expect people to be entirely up to date with all of the goings on. So I'll fill you in on that, but I just wanted to mention a couple of other things that I'm aware people will probably may wish to raise. One is good news, and I'm just trying to find, I've now got this enormous folder of things, and I don't know where everything is, but those of you who are familiar with the redevelopment works out here in the square will know that there is a kangaroo statue on its way. Watson Community Association has been involved in both the selection... I'm sorry. No. It's been a long day. Downer Community Association, and I was on to the next thing in my head already. Downer Community Association has been involved in the both the consideration of what that statue is going to look like. It's replacing a statue that disappeared previously, although Dennis did tell me at one point he might know what it is. Anyway, we've got the new kangaroo, and we know where it's going to be located, and I understand that it will be in March, late March?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Bruce. So that will be good news, and obviously there'll be a big, some kind of public unveiling on that. So thank you everyone who's been involved with Downer Community Association on that. I'm also conscious that Downer residents have been talking about planning issues quite a lot recently in relation to both the city and gateway framework and the planning strategy refresh that was released at the end of last year. So I'm happy to take questions on that, but it might actually be more productive, at least initially. I'm happy to stay if people want to do it this way, but I know that Downer Community Association representatives met with Minister Gentleman subsequent to that meeting, and I understand that a number of issues were resolved in that meeting, or there was at least a bit more clarity provided in that meeting. So I'm obviously happy to take questions on that, but it might work better if someone reports back and then questions. So that's up to the meeting, obviously. And Watson Community Association, I wanted to say I did attend the presentation, which was on the same night, I think, as the Downer Community Association meeting, of the Watson plan developed by the community. I just wanted to congratulate Watson Community Association on all the hard work that's gone into that. And Jeff, good to see you again. Our paths cross on a number of fronts. And obviously that's something that the government has welcomed, the feedback from Watson Community Association and residents there, and probably many other people in this room will be aware that some blocks on Section 76 and Section 74 in Watson are on the indicative land release program, but there has been an initial round of consultation in relation to their currently zoned CZ5 and CZ6. I just get those. CZ6 leisure and accommodation, and so there has been a consultation around adding residential use to those sites. That's currently, the process is currently with EPSDD Urban Renewal Team, considering the feedback that was received from the community, doing some technical work around that, and preparing a report for Minister Gentleman, who would make a decision about whether a territory plan variation then goes forward. But of course then that would involve another round of consultation with the community. And certainly Bruce, put your hand up for those people who don't know Bruce Fitzgerald, who's the Executive Director of the Urban Renewal Space in Environment Planning and Sustainable Development Directorate. He and I were both at the Watson Community Association meeting and heard the feedback from the community about some of the things that that the community wants to see in terms of more usable green space, more community amenity, concern around the speed at which development is occurring in North Watson, and the the fact that Watson Shops and Madura Primary are sort of the primary supports for their community in terms of facilities, and that's that there's not a lot of community facility in North Watson. I'm giving some sort of broader thought to that as well, and I did have a few good conversations with people after the meeting around the fact that if we're going to invest in usable green space, these are two quite large pieces of land, and if we're going to invest in usable green space for the community, if we're going to invest in urban realm improvements and community facilities in the broader sense, we actually need a revenue source to do that, and that I think that on these blocks there's actually potential for a really good outcome of some residential and some really good community amenity there to replace what is essentially a capital paddock at the moment, and some green space that is not very well utilised by the community. What we also heard, of course, was in relation to maintaining trees and to increasing tree canopy. I suppose that takes me to section 72 and some of the issues, of course, that we've heard that I was saying. Excuse me for a second, I'm just trying to find the document, which is my latest letter to Leon, not the first one. Oh, this stuff. Yep, no, I've got it. So one of the things that we talked about in relation to section 72 in the meeting we had on the 1st of February was, well, maybe I'll go back a step. You'll all be aware that through the course of 2018 there were 2 stages of community engagement around section 72. So the first stage of broad community engagement around what people wanted to see, a second stage of more detailed engagement that presented 2 scenarios, and I think officials were very clear from the start of that consultation that they were not design options, that nothing was set in concrete, that they were presenting some building shapes and sizes to enable people to actually visualise the kinds of things that might be able to fit onto section 72 and have a conversation about what is needed around both the way we think about the way the buildings look, the land use, and the connectivity and the urban realm around those buildings. I think it was fair to say, in the conversation I had with the working group, was that part of that consultation got a little bit, so EPSCD has been trying a lot of different methods of engagement with the community, and putting forward those scenarios was a new way of, was an experiment in trying to help people to visualise what buildings look like in their settings. But what we found, and we kind of had expected this might be the case, but it was probably more than we even realised, was that people, intuitively thought that that was what we were intending to do, and B, that they intuitively went, all of those buildings are going to be residential, and they're going to be 100% residential, and it didn't matter how many times we said that's not what we're intending, that was what was seen and what was heard. And the other, and part of that challenge was that we were also having a conversation at the same time about form and function. We were having a conversation about land use at the same time as we were trying to have a conversation about what do we want this space to look like, how do we want this space to feel, and what kind of amenity do we want in this space. So we have heard some things, I think. So the latest letter that I've written back to Leon says 2 things. Firstly, we're still thinking about what the next stage of engagement looks like on section 72. We've heard the NCCC's proposal for the community reference group or panel, and I'm certainly open to having a community reference group, and I've said that I'm very much open to establishing a community reference group as part of the next stage of planning. But I do want to emphasise that the previous stages of consultation were genuine consultation. We heard from a lot of people, and we heard a lot of things that pretty much everybody agreed on. So the things that I think we got near universal agreement on from the community were that Dickson Section 72 should contain a mix of uses, including new community facilities, in an integrated precinct that better connects and builds on existing uses and services. And for those of you who are familiar with it, currently Section 72 is essentially 3 different bits. 2 roads, they're not connected, and there's Block 22 in the middle is a privately owned space that isn't then connected to the eastern part of the block. The Dickson Section 72 should be a safe environment. It should be inviting and permeable with appropriate lighting, passive surveillance and improved connections, especially for pedestrians and cyclists. That it should feature attractive and usable green space with existing trees retained to the greatest extent possible and an overall increase in the tree canopy, as well as places for children and families. So we heard that came through very clearly that people want places to go with their kids. And that we should ensure that development comprises primarily low to medium rise buildings up to 3 to 4 stories, but not primarily higher than that. Ideally,
Excuse me, so I'm new to this, I haven't been to one of these.
Oh, sorry.
Before. What section? 72?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Section 72 Dickson is it's where Dickson Pool is, the bit between Cowper Street, where Dickson Pool is, right up to the playing field. So it's that whole section that's between Antill Street, the stormwater drain, Cowper Street, and Dickson playing fields. So it's that whole area there. And what we have been having a conversation with the community about is we're not wanting to change anything that's already there. So we're not wanting to do anything with the pool or Majura Community Centre or any of the facilities and services and private enterprises that are already on the site. But there are 2 government-owned blocks on the site, and there's one that isn't yet in government isn't yet in control of that block, and we hope we will be, but we're not. And they're sort of right through the middle of the part of the site that's closest to the playing fields. So between the Majura Community Centre and the playing fields. And then the question for the community is, well, what do we want to be on that site and what do we want it to look like? And this isn't the first time that this conversation has been held, but this has been part of the frustration of the community that there was a previous consultation about this in 2014-15 that was very focused on seeing residential development built here. So that's the background. So apologies for assuming so much knowledge. And at the last North Canberra Community Council meeting, they passed a motion saying some of the things that they wanted to see on the site and proposing the establishment of a community reference panel to oversee the development of the site in a kind of independent and separate process. So what I am proposing is that a community reference group be established as a third stage, as part of the third stage of engagement. But I also noted in both the letter in December and again today, and in the meeting with the working group, that the government is committed to common ground on Block 25. It was an election commitment. It is a much needed community facility, and for those who aren't familiar with common ground, it is a mix of affordable housing and supported housing for people who've been long-term homeless. So there is Common Ground 1 is in Gungahl. It's provided, so the services are provided by Argyle Housing and Northside Community Services. And it's a proven model that brings in people who've been long-term homeless who require quite intensive support, but doesn't have them all living together as one group, but mixes in also people who just need affordable housing, affordable units. So 20 long-term homeless people, 20 people who require affordable housing. And then services are provided by Northside Community Services for Common Ground 1. And it's a housing first approach that enables people to have a secure roof over their head and to have the support they need to engage in the kind of support services that they need to get their lives back on track. And it's seen incredible outcomes with people who've been long-term homeless and had difficulty engaging, starting training courses, getting a job, getting their life back on track. And the ultimate goal is that people won't need that support in the longer term, and they'll be able to go out and be in the private market. But there's no time limit on the support that they receive from common ground. So that is the model. The cohort is not, the cohort of people who would be in common ground 2 in Dickson hasn't been finally determined or hasn't been announced at this point. So we are committed to pursuing common ground, a second common ground on Block 25 in Dickson. That it was an election commitment that would be in Dickson. It was reported in the newspaper that it would be on the old Downer Club site on Block 25. While the part of Section 72 on which common ground would be located was left open in stage 1 of the consultation last year because we were open. We had previously said Downer Club site, we were open saying, well actually, let's look and see if there's a better option. We have done that and we have concluded that actually the Downer Club site is the most appropriate site, particularly in the club. No. So the zoning, the CZ6 zoning doesn't currently allow for residential. So the initial plan for the Section 72 engagement was we were trying to work towards, through these 3 stages of engagement, work towards an estate development plan for the whole of Section 72 that would then see a territory plan variation, assuming that the outcome of the engagement was some change in use, that would then see a territory plan variation for the whole of the relevant part of Section 72. Our current proposal, as per my letter to Leon today, is that we will proceed with a separate territory plan variation and development application process for common ground so that we can get moving with that. I am confident that we will deliver a good urban design outcome. And for those of you who are familiar with common ground in Gungahlin, I wouldn't necessarily use that as the model in head of what common ground would look like on Section 72. I'm confident that we will deliver a good urban design outcome and that we will deliver an outcome that will enable common ground to be part of an integrated precinct into the future. And part of the reason that we are considering and probably have now made the decision to pursue a separate territory plan variation process and DA process for common ground is so that we can slow down the rest of the consultation around Section 72. We've heard from the community that 2 things primarily. Well, 2 things. We've heard one thing and one other thing has changed. When we started this consultation, we expected that the Salvation Army would have surrendered Block 22 to the government last year. That was an arrangement that related to a new block that they were pursuing in Greenway. That has not eventuated, and the Salvation Army still own Block 22. So us making preemptive plans about what's going to go on that site when we don't hold that site is potentially problematic. And that is a change in circumstance from when we started the engagement, and even when we started stage 2 of the engagement, where we still were expecting, am I right? I don't want to mislead, I really want to be transparent about this, because I think we still were expecting that site would be surrendered. The second thing is something that we heard loud and clear from the community, that we were asking people about potential uses for this land without community needs analysis being public. So we hold a lot of information in government about the kinds of community needs that exist in the community. Property Group gets a lot of applications for use of their land and buildings, rather. We hear a lot from the community about the things that they would like to do, but we also there's also an unknown out there around what private sector and community sector would do if there was a block of community facilities owned land that they could kind of ask for. So we have commissioned a specific community needs analysis for the inner north, but focusing on then how can Section 72, how does that work? How does Section 72 fit into that? We're expecting that work to be completed within about the next 6 weeks, and so we. So that's the other reason for slowing down the process, is we have recognised that actually the community is so engaged in this and feels like we haven't been able to have a proper conversation about use without that piece of information available. So my proposal is that we are proceeding with common ground, separate territory plan variation, separate development application process. There will be the usual community consultation and capacity to engage in that process. I really hope NCCC and NCCC members engage positively in that process around delivering a good urban design outcome, but also delivering a much needed piece of social infrastructure for the inner north. And then we will have a stage 3 of consultation around, okay, what does the rest of the site look like? And that will include a community session. Now, I've said in my letter, I'm very happy to talk further with the NCCC working group around how that process works. So we want any group to be truly representative of the community and the interested parties, and that includes the current tenants on Section 72. There are at least 9 current tenants on Section 72, and they obviously have a direct interest in what happens on that block, on that section. Obviously, there are people who are passionate about Section 72 in this room and in North Canberra Community Council, but there are also a whole bunch of other people who actually do have an interest and do care about outcomes, who don't come to these meetings, and we need to capture those voices as well. And the engagement to date has captured a number of voices that we don't, oh, you can sit there if you want, that we don't normally hear from through different mechanisms like our online surveys and engagement. So composition and size of the group will be important. How the group operates will be important, and I'm certainly considering options around independent facilitation and participatory democracy kind of processes to try and actually come to a solution, and then what the group is actually going to look at. And because we don't have the community needs analysis yet, and we're still awaiting some sort of further certainty around what is or may not happen with Block 22, I don't want to establish the group yet because we can't really write a terms of reference for it without those 2 pieces of information. So it's a bit watch this space around the rest of Section 72, but it is not a walking away from a commitment to urban renewal in Section 72. And I would note that even NCCC's own presentations and proposals have indicated support for some types of residential dwellings on Section 72, whether it's environmentally friendly, eco-housing, great sustainability outcomes, demonstration model, whether it's housing for older people. There has been some support for that, even from people who are otherwise opposed to private residential development on the site, or who just genuinely want to see a mix. Like, I genuinely want to see a mix of uses on the site. Like, I genuinely do. And that's probably, yeah. So, oh, the other thing on that that I probably need to mention is the other factor that I'm considering in this is the fact that the territory plan review process is about to, will be kicking off shortly. And as part of that process, Ben Pont has talked about district level plan, is that right? District level? I've got that right? I wrote it down on another piece of paper. Has talked about a district level planning approach that recognises that different parts of Canberra have different existing characters and different future needs and different community interests.
Some of those mentioned in the 2018 planning
strategy.
Planning intent statement.
Oh, the 2015.
No, the 2018.
Oh, okay. And it is also mentioned in the planning strategy.
Yes.
Yes, the planning strategy. So, yes. So, for example, this area, Dickson, Downer, Watson, Hackett area is quite different to Barton, Kingston, Griffith area. So applying the same approach across both areas is not necessarily going to give us the best outcome. So it's about really recognising what the areas of interest are and understanding how we can plan better at that district level. Given that, given the conversations that we're going to be having with Watson residents about Section 74 and 76, given the conversation that Downer Community Association is very keen to have about the development of Downer, what I don't want to end up with is 5 different community reference groups all looking at different little pieces of this district. I don't think that would be helpful to anybody, because the same people would want to engage in a lot of those things, and they would want to engage in the district level, and it's just going to create a lot of work for everyone with a potential for it to be disjointed. So on that basis, I also want to hold back a bit making the final decision about what stage 3 of engagement Section 72 looks like. Yes?
I was very pleased to hear you say setting up community reference group. I might disagree with you that the whole area should have the same reference group. Seems to me that if you want consultation with a community, you have a community reference group for each suburb in the same way that you're doing it for Dickson. It's just that it's a useful way of doing it. And DCA had a community reference group when this out here was being discussed, and it worked very well.
Yeah. Well, that's really useful feedback. Thank you very much for that. Because
I think what it is that overall.
What was it? We can't hear it.
oh, sorry. The first piece of feedback was that welcoming the community reference group proposal and noting that having it at a whole district level will, it isn't going to get the focus that you need on local community interest and issue. And then noting that Downer Community had a community reference group for development out here, and that had worked well. And then, sorry, what was your
I think we've talked about the whole overall planning plan for the whole area, the whole integrated plan, which I don't think exists yet, and that's what we're missing.
Yeah. And so that's really where, Ben's very keen to have that district level conversation around the overall plan, and then where do these bits, how do these individual pieces fit into that whole district level conversation.
Does the Department of Government have a plan, the whole plan?
Oh no, the idea of the territory plan review would be to have those conversations at district level to move towards having a district level. And look, none of that is even that's the thinking about how we engage at district level and talk about it. And Bruce is probably in a better position to maybe talk. Am I putting you on the spot?
You are.
Okay. Bruce is not in a better position to talk about it. Well, that's the question. How big? What does make sense? What is a genuine community of interest in terms of planning issues? And so I think it's probably reasonable to say that Dickson, Downer, Watson, Hackett is a genuine community of interest around planning issues. But people who live here might not agree with me on that. That's also the conversation that we need to have if we're going to do district level planning. The district's level needs to make sense.
But at this stage, there is no overall plan for Watson, as we discussed at our meeting just recently.
Yeah.
There just isn't a plan in existence.
So I'm not sure if you were here when early on when I started, but I did recognise the Watson Community Association's work on the plan that you have done, and that government has welcomed that work. That's part of the challenge, I think, is that suburb level planning can be helpful but interesting, but also can miss actual shared interests across suburbs, and I don't quite know how. So, Watson Community Association, how long did it take you, Jeff, to develop your plan?
Oh, about five months.
Okay, so if that piece of work had been done by the Environment Planning and Sustainable Development Directorate, and this is not a criticism of them, but they would have had 3 stages of engagement and consultation. It would have taken 2 years. And then it would have been some, master plan that people wouldn't have necessarily agreed with all of it, and it would have had to go through a legislative assembly process, and you don't actually necessarily get the best outcome. And you don't necessarily get an outcome from those processes that all community members are happy with. That is almost impossible to deliver. And Woden is a good example of where a lengthy master planning process has taken place, and there is a very clear master plan, and yet the community is asking for a new plan. So a very lengthy consultation process that delivered a master plan, and the community is still saying, well, actually that's not quite what we want. So, yes.
Yeah, and on that, in the community of interest, I have a soft spot for Lynham, which I think has a community of interest with Dickson and O'Connor and Turner and Brad and all of this area. So, yes, I hear your problem on this. Good luck.
Fortunately, not actually my problem.
Well, okay. Good luck to that. Is it your problem?
No, it's not
No,
mine.
not my problem, which is why.
Yeah. So yeah, this conversation will go on in other forums, as you probably will know about environment and planning, etc. So it's very much a watch this space thing.
Yes.
I think my point got a bit lost there. It really was about, it's either, I take your point about what is the area of interest, and maybe it's North Canberra. And there are city planners who know what sort of things to look at. That's what they studied in their university. So what I was still sort of expecting was this draft plan with a lot of input, a lot of expertise and information and ideas that come from a professional city planner as a basis to work on, as a basis for the Watson Community Association and the Downer Community Association, because it provides the overall view of North Canberra. That's what I'm looking for. Otherwise, I just get the feeling that the community's contributing, or supposed to be contributing, an awful lot of professional expertise, but they don't have it. So I'm looking to see all of that professional expertise provided to the community, but that's not happening.
So for those who did anyone not hear that? Okay, so for those who didn't hear that, that was about saying that it's all very well for the community to come up with its plans, but what we actually need is some expertise from planning professionals to provide a guidance around what the future looks like, what their view is about what makes sense in planning for a particular area. And I guess the first answer to that is that's kind of what the planning strategy refresh did. So the planning strategy provides that high-level view about what's happening with our demographics, what's happening with our urban form, what the changes are. The update from 2012 to 2018 did go through a community consultation process, and again it was a different kind of engagement process that EPSCD ran. It was much more how do we best manage and facilitate the growth in our city that is inevitable. And so the professional view around that, what are the trade-offs between greenfield development and urban infill development, and how do we best do that, and which areas are going to potentially accommodate, and then how do we do medium density housing, higher density housing, where do we do that, what are their transport interests in that. That's coming through the planning strategy, the integrated transport strategy, the climate change strategy. All of those things fit together to provide, I guess, the high-level view based on consultation, but also based on technical and expert input around where we are heading.
Okay, that's a sort of framework issue. Some of the framework. A lot of things that are missing out of that are community services, playing fields. How do you move from one place to the other? How do you build community? The sort of issues we might, think about here. How do you move from one place to the other?
Okay, I will address that, but I feel like you're wanting to maybe address that as well.
Well, it's all right. I was thinking that what you have in your hands is a new model of doing things that community would like. Because we could talk about the planning strategy for 2018. Downer wasn't even involved. There was nothing. We had not been consulted in any way on that. And that's why I got such a surprise. But having reference groups and having a broader group then looking at the whole of the development and all. And I actually think the Watson provides a model of the community doing something, working with the professionals when needed. And so you've got a new model that people will probably find more satisfactory than the last one they've got at the moment.
And I guess on the planning strategy, you know, it is, because it's a whole of Canberra, a whole of ACT document, there's opportunity to engage, but there's not that local, we're not sending flyers to every person and knocking on the door. So I take your point on that. I guess where we also took into account, though, in looking at the planning strategy, you know, when it came through other ministers and things, the feedback that we received from the community in relation to the City and Gateway framework, which obviously residents were very engaged in the feedback on that, and in fact, despite some reporting, did actually have a significant impact on the changes along the...
Not as much as has been reported.
Well...
But however, that's
yes, certainly probably the most significant changes that were made to the City and Gateway framework between the draft and the final were changes in response to Downer residents in the way that I saw it. So that I recognise that it potentially wasn't everything that Downer residents might have liked to see, but there certainly was, you know, a significant reduction in height at the edge of Downer, that complete removal of the landmark at Phillip Avenue intersection. So yes, not necessarily everything people would have liked to see, but definitely listened to and definitely changes made as a result of those consultations. And that then flowed into our consideration around.
I just don't want you to lose the fact that you're actually talking about a model that could work very well.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much. That's good. So I think now I haven't lost your. Oh, so I think on the question. Then the question was, okay, well we've got this high level planning strategy, and then what does that mean on the ground for where your playing fields are going to go and where your community facilities are going to go? And that's the territory plan. That's part of the territory plan review, and those things are determined in the territory plan. So that's like the next stage of consultation. That then we're talking about having that district level approach, bringing that district level approach to it. But there is already a territory plan that tells you what's green space, what's residential zoned, what's commercial zoned, where your parks and where your community facilities can go. So that kind of stuff that already exists. It's just very, very complicated.
Minister, I'm a Watson resident involved in developing the Watson plan, but there's similar concerns being raised by Campbell, Watson, Downer, everywhere, and that is we want tree canopy, green spaces, active travel routes, shops and facilities, correct site orientation. It's really basic stuff which the experts would understand. But what we're seeing is terrible developments. I mean, the architects and the builders are even saying that most apartments in Canberra are defective. So we're struggling to find out, okay, you can't deal with individual suburbs, but we've all got the same concerns. We're not getting the message through to government. Can you please put some quality standards on developments and make sure we have active travel routes and the mums who need to get to the shops or the chemist or have a way to go.
So there are some active travel routes built into the City and Gateway framework around in North Canberra, and obviously we're not committed to that. It's sometimes very, very expensive to build some of these things, particularly within existing communities. But we certainly know that we need to improve active travel options, and that's a key part of the integrated transport strategy, which is out for consultation at the moment. But it clearly prioritises active travel, pedestrians and cyclists, public transport. It's very much interlinked with the climate change strategy as well. The issue of building quality is in terms of defective buildings is in some ways a separate issue, and there's a lot of work going on around building regulation, and you'll probably be aware that we've introduced new licensing requirements for Class C and leading up to Class B and A builders, and in fact there were quite a lot of questions in question time about this today, but increased regulatory action being taken around defective building or poor building quality. But the issue of design is in some ways a separate issue than the build quality one. And in relation to that, I mean, I think we agree, we have seen some developments that are both not great urban design, they don't look that great, and they're not great quality. Like we can't possibly argue that doesn't exist in Canberra. Of course we have seen that. And that's why we've cracked down on the building quality issue, but also introduced the design review panel, which is currently an interim panel, but along any significant development and developments along major transport corridors and that kind of thing are reviewed by the design review panel. At the moment, its role is only advisory, so it provides advice to the developer about how they might want to improve their design, and that's also taken into account by planning. And we have seen some improvements in buildings as a result of the feedback of the design review panel. But we know it's only an interim, and work is ongoing to make that a permanent part of the planning system. And sometimes other issues will conflict with the advice of the design review panel, and they also need to be taken into account in terms of just our regulatory requirements. But we absolutely agree, and one of the things I said in my first speech in the chamber was particularly around the redevelopment in the inner north and along the Northbourne corridor. This is a once in a generation opportunity, and we want to see great design outcomes. And that's why when we released the sites on in Braddon and Turner on Northbourne that have been released through the Suburban Land Agency as part of the asset recycling initiative, those went out to tender with a very clear, with a sort of draft design that had been previously developed through a competition process, and a very clear requirement that developers would compete, or that purchasers of those pieces of land were competing on both design and price. And we want to deliver a really great design outcome on those very key strategic sites. So we're really thinking about how do we release land to get good design outcomes. Similarly in Red Hill, a really clear estate development plan was developed with the community after some initial controversy around the territory plan variation process, but then we sat down with the community through workshops, developed a really, really good, clear estate development plan, and released the land on the basis of you must build to this plan and with these design, like these quality requirements, and we're going to see, I think, a really great, not affordable unfortunately, but a really great product in Red Hill in terms of quality and design. So we're not going to be able to go back and retrofit all of the developments that we may not think have been as good as we would have liked, but we are really focused on that going forward.
Just build on what you asked. It feels to me that the inner north and the inner south are bearing the brunt of the urban infill policy of the government. Another 37,000 dwellings just on the Northbourne Avenue corridor, additional dwellings. Why are the inner north and the inner south being having to bear that brunt?
Well, it's partly the natural way that cities develop. So the inner north and inner south are desirable places, close to amenity, and it is kind of the natural development of a city that its centre gets more dense. And good transport, good access to services, those are the places where you want, particularly along something like a light rail corridor, where you want more people to live.
Yeah, people in Tuggeranong deserve good transport too.
People in Tuggeranong have excellent roads,
Yeah,
like really excellent.
Well that's not what we want. We want public transport. They have very poor public transport, and
they actually have a pretty decent bus service.
Okay.
I mean, to be
well, we can disagree on that, but we can, they'll never get as good public transport until they become denser. Because it can't be justified.
Can I make a point here?
Yes, of course, Leo.
We have 3% of Canberra's journeys to work by bicycle overall. One of the reasons why we would want to target the north and in the south for higher residential densities is that in the inner north, that percentage of journeys to work by bicycle is 20%, because it's within cycling distance of some decent destinations. No matter how dense you make Tuggeranong, people aren't going to ride their bicycles from there to the Parliamentary Triangle.
Is that right, from there to the Tuggeranong town centre or whatever?
That's what the whole thing was
Why
in the town centre, yes.
I mean, part of it is, you know, there is an element to which we have to respond to demand of where people want to live, and people want to live in the inner north and inner south. And from the kind of point that Leon makes, intensifying close to services where people can use active travel makes sense from an urban renewal and urban design perspective. There is redevelopment going on in Tuggeranong. There is building of medium and high density. It depends how you define high density. There's not 20-storey towers going up in Tuggeranong, but there are in Belconnen and Gungahlin and Woden. So intensification is not just happening in the inner north and inner south. There are very significant amounts of apartment developments happening in Gungahlin, in Belconnen, in Woden. In Tuggeranong less so, but that is a market demand issue. And the other issue, I guess, is from our perspective, you know, we've been focused on the inner north and inner south in terms of a design perspective, because we own land that we have been selling and we want to achieve good design on that land as well. Sorry, yes, Mike.
Yeah, no, I wanted to back up on that part about the development, because part of it is driven by the fact that departments have moved from other town centers into Civic. So it's actually a policy decision. It's not some natural thing. There was a decision to centralize everything into Civic and basically go against the last 50 years. Yeah.
Well, I'm sort of shaking my head in terms of apartments have moved.
No, I'm talking about employment.
Oh, departments. Sorry, I thought you said apartments. And I'm thinking,
major
no.
Major difference. Sorry, I'm not speaking. So in other words, the idea that you could cycle into Tuggeranong or cycle into Belconnen actually worked for a long time. It's only over the last 10, 15 years, because I've seen it. I've been there long enough, despite my accent. I've seen, you know, a place that I really like then start to become, it's as if they've unlearned the lessons of other places where they said, we don't want a huge CBD, where everyone has to go in one direction in the morning and the other direction in the other places at night. So the idea of having the town centers is a great idea. It still is a great idea. And ironically, they're saying the only reason it hadn't come to full fruition is Canberra wasn't big enough. They said it would be close to 1 million. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, now they're saying Canberra's big enough, so now we're doing the opposite? I haven't figured out the logic, but it seems totally reversed, because if anything, we should be, instead of concentrating employment in Civic, and of course the airport's another issue, right? The town centers should be keeping their employment so that they are sustainable, and you can do the same things there as here. They're paying for it because they have to commute into the Civic. We're paying for it because we're getting built out.
Relocalisation is where community happens.
Yeah, well, exactly.
And
So I mean, I guess I'm just saying is that there's a line of thinking that I've heard government in a number of places. I'm saying no, that's not really, you know, what had been happening, and we're actually just completely ignoring some very good lessons and advice from the past. And I think we are going to be poorer for it in the future.
Well, I suppose I would make 2 points on that. First, that we, the ACT government, can't really control what decisions the federal government makes around where they move their people to. We can lobby, but we can't make the final decision. We have moved ACT government services and workers into Woden, for example. So we did a redevelopment of health offices and a new Access Canberra building in Woden. So we have tried to contribute to that. We have a government office building in Gungahlin, also, which is quite a significant, you know, some of you, if you go to Gungahlin, might have gone to the amazing Access Canberra shopfront. That's really very nice. So we do try to contribute to some of that employment in town centres, but the reality of the efficiency of government working as well is that it's not very efficient for people to be spending a lot of time travelling backwards and forwards. So if they have to kind of be near the central parts, it does also make it a bit difficult to kind of then locate them.
So I got to interrupt on that part, because actually, by having everything concentrated here, you are making people travel a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
So ironically, if you had them in different places, you had a good public transport between the town centres, which we used to have anyway, I actually used to find it very easy to ride a bike in the Civic, and you can go to one of the other town centres. And if I was at, let's say, the other town centre, I could ride my bike into that centre and boom.
Sorry,
So I
if
guess
we're talking across purposes, I meant people travelling during the day for work and having to travel backwards and forwards between.
It's all electronic.
Can I just interrupt at this point and say it's been fantastic having this discussion.
Sue had, I think, a burning question.
I have
All right.
two
Can we make
questions.
Can we make
Two
these
And
one more?
there was a question over
All right,
here as
two more
well.
questions after that, and then we'll have to.
Okay, so yep, there was a question over here as well.
Two quick questions. The design review panel sounds fantastic, and I know it exists, but doesn't it only apply to the narrow Northbourne corridor where the NCA and the ACT government has responsibility? It doesn't have responsibility for looking at what goes on in Downer or Watson?
No, so it has responsibility along that corridor, but also for significant development. So yeah, it won't look at a single house redevelopment, but a significant development, yes. So obviously there's been some commentary about its role in Manuka recently, which you might have seen in media.
And my second
Yep,
question
Sue had 3 questions, sorry. And then there was
I
another
assume
one.
the ACT government's done a lot of work on the budgetary support for Common Ground 2 since October 2016. So what is the time frame for the construction and completion of it on Section 72?
So I can't...
I mean, how long would it take from the land and all that being rezoned from then on?
So I can't give you exact timings on that, but I can say that you and the broader community can expect to hear something more concrete in the next couple of months about that.
One of the...
Hang on.
First of all, I want to thank you for I live in Section 72. You've got all the houses on one side of Junior Street, this Section 72. Not the other side, just the side that backs onto it. And I got a notice for the demolition that's going to start on a set of buildings there. I want to thank you for that, because in the past that's never happened.
Oh, okay.
Buildings have been built that actually look into my yard. And you didn't include all of those houses as tenants of Section 72.
Well, yes, so Section 72, you include that, does already include some residential, but generally, yeah. So, point well made. And I'm glad that you got the notification of that, and I know there has been some debate around that. I know Jane's had a conversation with the Directorate about ensuring that the trees that she was concerned about are going to be
because
protected.
they're directly behind me and I'm directly affected.
Yeah.
So I will be overlooked by all the 3-storey and 4-storey.
That was the next thing I was going to say. We've certainly heard the feedback from residents about concerns about potential overlooking. I know at the last meeting that I was at, where the original, I think it was September, where the scenarios were presented, there was a conversation about the people from EPSDD have actually gone into the dance studio, the top floor of the dance studio, and
I can see them in there.
Well, you can probably see them because they're lit, but they said they can't see across. But then I know that would depend on the trees and all of that sort of thing. But we have certainly heard in relation to any design development going forward, and particularly around Block 25, obviously there are significant stands of mature gum trees between Block 25 and the stormwater drains that are quite high. So, So we're certainly taking that into account, that feedback into account in terms of design around the development.
And since we're talking about transport, it takes my granddaughter an hour to go from Duffy Street in Ainslie to ANU on a bus.
How did you do that?
And then, pardon?
How long, sorry?
An hour.
An hour.
Because she has to go to Civic. The bus only runs every half an hour. And I had a long discussion with her today about that because I wanted to explain how it took that long. And that's how long it takes.
Well, thank you for that feedback. I will take that on board. I'm not sure there's much I can say to respond to it, except to say that the new bus network that's due to start from late April is intended, and it may not fix these sort of quite local journeys, but the principle behind the new bus network is more direct routes more often. We know that people are more likely to take public transport if it's going to get them where they're going to go quicker, and if they know that they can turn up to a stop and there's going to be a bus within a reasonable time, rather than turning up and having just missed one and waiting an hour, which I know that there are a number of bus routes through the Antill at the moment that run once an hour and off peak. So
Yes, one of the attractions of Hackett, Watson, Downer is the village atmosphere. Small areas, and this now is suddenly going to change in Downer with this massive development right next door with massive implications on traffic, cars, on this very, very small village atmosphere which you've been playing around with cosmetic improvements and so on down here. But the whole idea, and many of the people in this room, I'm sure will agree with me, they moved to these areas because of that literally quiet, almost village atmosphere to these areas.
Yes.
And now we're suddenly going to get these massive blocks of developments in these areas that's going to destroy the whole quality of life for living in these areas.
So I guess I'd just say two things. The process for developing this building we were talking about before with the community reference panel, there was a lot of community engagement around this.
We took 3 years, and under the old management of CHC, we would raise an issue. They'd have every one of our meetings, we'd raise issues, they'd go to the government, come back and report back. And there was a compromise, there always has to be. But I think we generally appreciated the way it worked, but it took a long time.
Yeah, and I think the key message from I was reported back to me from the meeting with Minister Gentleman in relation to the Downer, the impact of Downer on the planning strategy was there's no proposal to change zoning within Downer beyond what's in the city and gateway strategy. What we're talking about, when we talk about intensification, we're not just talking about multi-unit high-rise buildings, we're also talking about the missing middle. The townhouses and the sort of 2 to 3 story apartment buildings that many people actually actively looking for to downsize into, who've got freestanding houses in the north that are too big for them, they don't want to maintain. People are actively looking for that opportunity to downsize in the area that they love. And if we don't enable some intensification, there's no opportunity to do that. Sorry.
Dennis, did you have something to say?
I wanted to raise a question around Sullivan's Creek. So I represent the Canberra project, and that's a project where we started a project-specific territory plan variation in late 2015, and as part of that we were encouraged to do community consultation, which we did, and it was a very good process. We ran lots of workshops with the community and actually had the community involved in the development of the master plan, and we identified the constraints and opportunities and outcomes that we wanted for the site.
Excellent work, if only all developers did.
Well, it was, and we actually got something unprecedented for developers in Canberra. We got a letter from this organisation, from Gungahlin Community Council, from Northside Community Services to the Minister, recommending that the process that they'd been through was extremely valuable, and that should be used as a model for future engagement. We had a professor of urban design facilitate, and we identified key objectives. And what came out of that, so was something really, there were a lot of things that came out of that came out of the consultation from last year that was done. So we had to stop once the framework started. So we did our process for 2 years. We did all the consultation. We were right there with the territory plan variation. Then the corridor framework was announced to be run by MCA and ACT government. So we had to pause. So that was late 2017, and it's just coming to a conclusion now. So the letters that were written were saying, please don't let the process that we've been through go to waste. And we were encouraged by the draft framework because it largely, not completely, but it largely represented the work that we've done with the community. But the final framework announced in December and the amendment announced mid-January is very different. And that means that some of the things that were identified that we're all hoping to achieve won't be possible. And one of those is naturalisation of Sullivan's Creek. So Sullivan's Creek exists as a concrete line drain. We have over a kilometre of frontage to that creek, and we have a kilometre of frontage to Northbourne Avenue. So we engaged engineers to look at what naturalisation actually means. For that concrete line drain to be naturalised, you have to widen it to slow down the flow. So the flows in a concrete line drain are very fast. You have to halve that, so you have to double the width to get rid of it. That actually means giving up land because the reserve boundary is only 3 metres from the top of the concrete drain. So on our site, with the master plan that came up with the community, there was a recognition that to achieve the active travel corridor along Sullivan's Creek that would continue through Yuwani to the Southwell Park and then eventually be able to hook up to the corridor through O'Connor and down to the ANU, we'd have to give up some land to do that. And the other, so that was a key thing. Under the current amendment, that's not possible because we're going to 3-storey townhouse style construction with pitched roofs. So much lower density with greater setbacks at the front of the site facing the federal highway. So the height's been cut in half, and the setbacks have been increased. Okay. The second thing that came out of our consultation was the importance of large trees, shadeways, resilience during major heat events and droughts and things like that. And so the idea there was, and this came out of some of the work with the urban planners, was a concept of trade-off where, and I know a lot of people think height is a bad thing, but if it's done properly, it can be a good thing. And so there's a line of existing trees along the front of the federal highway. The idea was if we did 6 stories behind that at a lower density, not wall to wall, then you can have more open space in between. And more open space means larger trees. Larger trees means creating microclimates. It means creating decent shade and having a real impact on the outdoor environment and making it more resilient and more comfortable during extreme heat events. So that's now gone. And my concern is that we're down to 3 stories, so we'll just do the normal plot ratio that's permitted under the territory plan. So my regret is that there was a workshop held last year in Downer where there were decisions made and presentations made about the site and line, and it was done without any of the knowledge and work, and there was a lot of work by the community and by ourselves on what we'd already done for Lyneham. It just wasn't referenced, wasn't ignored, it wasn't, and it's a real shame. So I just wanted to make that point, and I've written to Leon and said, look, this policy that where the National Capital Plan amendment that closes on the 4th of March is a significant document. What we do on that site, and it's 12.5 hectares, we're going to we're going to live with for the next 30 or 40
I'm
years.
sure this is going to work.
Yeah.
No, look,
That's just
Well,
yeah.
we had a couple of guys from here. I had two CEOs out here today, both from Switzerland. One's from a timber manufacturing company. The other one does timber erection and passive house construction, okay? I took them through the amendment compared to what the draft was, and you could just see go like that.
And
I would certainly encourage anybody who has that feedback from the National Capital Authority, while their process is still open, I would certainly encourage anybody to provide that feedback to the
They
National
can't lodge
Capital
to the federal minister without ACT government support.
Well, I would encourage you, I can't really say more than that, but I would strongly encourage you to provide that feedback both to the National Capital Authority and to us, not just you, but any residents
I think
who
the
support.
residents have to do it. The developer
Any residents who
doesn't have
support
it.
this development option.
No, just. Oh, no, they're okay.
And I guess the context for that, the context for that is that you'll be aware, and as I said earlier, one of the most significant changes that was made to the City and Gateway framework between the draft and the final was a reduction in height along Northbourne Avenue next to Downer. That had the National Capital Authority's view is that they want to see, what's the word I'm looking for?
Balance.
Symmetry, that's the word.
Symmetry.
Symmetry on both sides of Northbourne Avenue. Not something that we currently have, but that is a strong view that they would like to see symmetry along Northbourne Avenue, and so the reduction in height for Downer, for the edge of Downer, that was a response to community feedback about the suburb of Downer and the character and the intersection with Phillip Avenue, has also been reflected as a result of that, the preference for symmetry on the other side of the federal highway.
No, that's a shame.
If residents have a strong view that that was not the right response, that they appreciate the reduction in height on this side of the federal highway, but they don't think it's a good idea for the other side, I would strongly encourage you to provide that feedback.
Do it now.
So one of the key points there, and I don't want to hijack the meeting, but the only reason I'm saying this is this policy is for the next 30 or 40 years and it closes on the 4th of March.
So maybe I should wrap up, and this meeting could have a conversation about whether they want to formally write to the National Capital Authority and express that view.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
I'll bring you a chair.
I'm not going to stay. I've got too much work to do. But thank you very much for your time, everybody. And I'm